Amazing turnout the last week of classes, so thank you all for taking the time to come, and we think we're going to find this quite rewarding. I want to just tell you a little bit about the UC Davis Race Project and the context for this event and the exhibition that we have just actually mounted in Hart Hall. I'm Sunaina Myra. I teach in Asian American Studies. I see several of my students and comrades here, so welcome everyone. The UC Davis Race Project is a group of faculty and students who have been actually trying to develop a study to look at histories of race, racism, and racial justice and social justice movements at UC Davis. And this was actually a project that was born out of the need to actually have connections amongst different ethnic studies and racial justice and social justice movements. And so we actually have gotten a grant from the UC Center for New Racial Studies to launch the first UC Race Project amongst all the UC campuses. And next year we are planning to do a study which will include understanding how faculty, students, staff, and workers at UC Davis understand and experience the university as a racial institution and different sites and spaces of mobilization within the university. So we're actually going to be doing interviews with students and focus groups possibly, oral histories, especially with senior faculty who have a sort of historical memory of the institution that we think is very important to keep, because we know the institution may not keep that for us. And we're also actually going to do and continue to do archival research. The exhibit that some of you might have seen as you were coming in through the lobby and through the hallway is a collection of materials from the Third World newsletter, which some of the panelists might touch on, but in brief was actually the publication of the Third World Forum that was established at UC Davis. You know, we're one of the campuses with one of the first ethnic studies programs in the country in the early 70s. So there was a history of coalition building and radical student activism at UC Davis that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 decades. So we want to actually situate current mobilizations and protest movements in this longer history, because we think that in fact there are many stories here that need to be told. So we've begun doing archival research in Shields. So some of what you see there is the product of some really hard work by some students. Alvarado is here. He's been doing a lot of hard work along with Priol Opadye, who I don't think is here yet. Priol, are you here yet? No. Just probably at some class. And also Zomar Clemente, who has already graduated. But we really would love for you, as you go on to the reception after the event, to really take a look at some of these materials, because they make the connections between campus politics and local, regional, national, and global politics in a really interesting way. I also want to emphasize that this is not a project that's based on nostalgia. We don't want to claim that this moment is like the golden age of activism. What actually we're trying to show is that there's some really important currents as students and faculty and workers have tried to make a space, particularly with the onslaught of neoliberalism and also the contradictions of multiculturalism as it's increasingly turned into a tool of diversity management that is not always necessarily productive of the maintenance of racial justice. So we want to look at what are the campaigns and issues that are permissible, what are the campaigns that are policed, and we want to link the protests against the budget crisis, student debt, the role of the banks, corporatization of the university, to questions of racism and racial justice. We think there's a really important conjuncture and linkage here to be made. So in fact, it's Occupy meets ethnic or critical race studies, and trying to understand the histories of protest and justice then and now. So we have a wonderful panel that my colleague, Natalia Sosa of Chicana Studies is going to introduce to you. The format in general is that we're going to have presentations for about 10 minutes from each of the speakers, and then we're going to have a reception with some refreshments, and you can talk more with the speakers at that time. There are some seats here, by the way. I want to welcome you all and invite you to please take
There are
a
chairs
seat.
even there.
You don't need to be standing throughout the event, so please come on up. So Natalia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's my distinct honor to introduce introduce to all of you this great panel. First is Malaquia Montoya. He's a UC Davis professor emeritus, and he's credited by historians as one of the founders of the social serigraphy movement in the San Francisco Bay Area in the mid-1960s. He has lectured and taught at numerous colleges and universities, including Stanford, UC Berkeley, the California College of Art, the University of Notre Dame, and the University of Texas, San Antonio. He has a unique visual expression, art of protest, depicting the resistance and strength of humanity in the face of injustice and the necessity to unite behind that struggle. He is a co-founder of El Taller Arte del Nuevo Amanecer, or TANA for short, a community-based art center in Woodland where he continues to teach. In 2011, the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center published a full-length monograph about him and his work, which I would encourage all of you to buy. It's fantastic. Okay. Stefano Varese, he's Peruvian of Italian descent, a social anthropologist who got his PhD from La Universidad Católica del Perú. He's an author of Salt on the Mountain, Ashaninka, I hope I pronounced it well, Utopia and Resistance of Peruvian Amazonia. There is already 5th edition. Witness to Sovereignty, Pueblos Indios y Globalismo, Pueblos Indígenas y Educación en México, Proyecto Nacional y Proyectos Étnicos. He has taught and done research in Peru, Mexico, Central America, and California. He came to UC Davis in 1987 as a full professor and retired in 2009. He's still active as the director of the Indigenous Research Centers of the Americas, IRCA, and INNAS. And he was a key participant in the Peruvian Revolution from 1968 to 1975, authoring and implementing a radical land and territorial reform and restitution for the Amazon indigenous people. Isao Fujimoto. He grew up in Yakima Indian Reservation in Wapato, Washington. During World War II, he was imprisoned with others of Japanese descent in the Hart Mountain, Wyoming, and Tule Lake in California concentration camps. Prior to joining the UC Davis faculty in 1967, he had been a probation officer, a U.S. Army correspondent in Korea, and a chemistry and English teacher in San Jose High School in San Jose, California. At UC Davis, he has helped start up the Department of Applied Behavioral Sciences, that is now the Community and Regional Development, Asian American Studies, and the graduate program in Community Development. He has been teaching in the UC Davis Summer Abroad program in Kyoto since 1991. He has been active with the Rural Development Leadership Network, which guides rural community organizers of minority background to complete their college degrees. Starting from RDLN's inception in 1985, he has helped participants from Indian countries Spanish-speaking Southwest and African American sectors of the Southeast. For more than 10 years, he has been a project facilitator for the Central Valley Partnership for Citizenship, a collaborative of active community-based organizations working with 150 emerging immigrant, migrant, and low-income communities in mid-California. That's a lot. Okay, what he has done. And he also serves in multiple boards, and he is a graduate of UC Berkeley, Stanford, and Cornell. We also have Fatima Sebag. Sorry. Senior International Relations and Middle Eastern South Asian student activist, fighting against the budget cuts and injustices since age 5. She witnessed some horrific, I know! She witnessed, that's why it's my honor to introduce them all. She witnessed some horrific scenes while growing up in an intensely crime-ridden urban setting in East Oakland. From gang wars to drug users shooting up, she first observed firsthand the misery and trauma inflicted by desperate, voiceless people upon themselves and the community. The frustrations at being so young and unable to help were then amplified by personal loss. Having the unfortunate trauma of witnessing a family member receive a fatal gunshot in the chest imbued in her a desire to dedicate her life to the freedom of her community, which she has done excellently. Natalia Kresich, no, I messed that up completely. Kresich, and I have been practicing. Is a senior in American Studies and Comparative Literature from San Francisco. She organizes in San Francisco and was active in the early phase of Occupy San Francisco. She has been involved politically on campus since the protest against Sedesco in 2006. Our two moderators, one of them is going to be Professor Wendy Ho, the Department of Asian American Studies and Women and Gender Studies program, and she has been chair of ASA for 6 years. And Dr. Sunaina Mayra, who is a professor of Asian American Studies and the coordinator of this great project, the UC Davis Breast Project, with me. So that's it.
I'll start first. Again, my name is Malaquias Montoya, and I came to UC Davis in 1989. I had been a professor at the California College of Arts and Crafts since 1968. Prior to that, I taught at the University Without Walls, which is an alternative university. Alternative university was very big around that time. And prior to that, I was teaching at UC Berkeley from 1971 to 1974. My participation or my activism started, I believe, when I was at San Jose City College. I had just been, I was there in 1965. Just 5 years prior to that, I had been picking grapes in Fresno. That was, I come from farm working parents, and that was what you did. So I wasn't that far removed. So in 1965, it was very natural for me to get so excited and involved when Cesar Chavez and the great boycott began. Activism for me was participation in what was taking place. I was also at that time working as a silkscreen printer. I was learning how to silkscreen. And one of the first things I did in 1968 when I was getting ready to transfer to UC Berkeley was to create the poster that was used to advertise one of the first Chicano graduation walkout in 1968 that became very well known. It was there weren't that many Chicanos graduating, but it was at a particular point where the president of San Jose State University gave his talk. There was a phrase, when he got to that phrase, all the Chicanos and the supporters would stand up and walk out of the graduation ceremony across the street. And that was the beginning of my participation. From there, I ended up going to Berkeley. I was married, 2 children. My hands had deteriorated very bad from the solvents that I was using in silk screening. I thought, well, great, Berkeley is so big, I'll just lose myself in the crowd. Well, before I got there, I had been asked to do some posters already for the great boycott that was taking place. Following that, the Third World Strike happened. I was a member of MECHA at that time. Participated in that to bring about the Ethnic Studies Department. We were asking for a third world college, but we settled for Ethnic Studies Department. For me, the Third World Strike was really interesting because what we were asking for was something very simple: classes that were relevant to us, classes that made sense to us. It wasn't asking a lot. We had learned about ourselves through the works of sociologists and anthropologists, and studying that work, we found that there were so many things left out, and we They presented a very crooked, twisted view of who we were. So it was very natural for us to say, we want our history presented in a different way. We want our history presented correctly. And not only that, we want our history presented to us by people that look like us. I couldn't believe the first morning of the Third World Strike, I had done posters the night before. I came on campus to the posters distributed to different groups that were participating, and I was not prepared for the incredible assault that took place by National Guard, the police, the highway patrol, and I just kept saying to myself, all we want is a good education. What is wrong with asking for that? But they were somehow determined that we were not going to have that. That strike lasted the entire semester, which many people got kicked out of school, many people were injured, many people went to jail. For me, that was an incredible awakening. The Chicano Studies Department was formed, Ethnic Studies was formed, and they had asked me if I had just graduated with my senior year as an art student. I was an art student at Berkeley, and I was asked if I would consider teaching a class on Chicano art, the poster. Interesting that the poster and the mural were very important to the Chicano Studies Department because the mural was used by Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozco after the revolution that took place in Mexico. The graphic movement in Mexico was also very important, so that became very important to us as we started getting involved in the struggle. I decided that I would teach the course. I was going to teach one course in silk screening, but under one condition, that I would not teach it up at the art department. And they said, well, why don't you want to teach it up there? And I said, well, I just graduated from there. And I find it the most thorough place to be. And I had no idea. I didn't know how to teach. I didn't study teaching or anything, but I just made up my mind that I was going to teach my courses different than anything I had taken in the art department before. So that's where the poster class that's now being taught here at Chicano Studies came about. The mural class, that's when I started to organize that my classes would be classes that would involve the community. And that was, because I thought to myself, if the university gives me 30, 40 students every day, what a waste of time if I don't organize them, if I don't do something with them. So my courses became that way. I never saw myself as a professor, as a teacher. I saw myself more as having 30 students in front of me that I could discuss, talk about what was taking place in the world, and have them produce art as a result of that. And that art not only would not be there to go into their portfolios, but would be distributed out in the community. The class that I ran, I would go out the quarter before and solicit ideas and work from different organizations. So I would go back to campus with a clipboard full of, I got to do a poster for the health clinic, I got to do a poster for the Legal Aid Society, and then I would go back to my classroom. My class ran from 8 to 6 every day. And that way students could come anytime that they wanted to during the day. That classroom became, again, a place to organize students. At that time, Chileans were coming into exile, people from Central South America. Somewhere along the way, they heard about it. We even called the classroom El Centro Chicano, Chicano Art Center. We would end up getting people from Chile, South America that would come there. They'd say, we heard about the Centro when we were here, we were there. Class would stop. They would give a lecture on what was taking place in their country. Poets would come, they would read poetry, and that's what the classes, and I felt that that's how classes should be. Inform not only the students, but ourselves about what learning is all about. So, all the classes that I did, after the posters were done, I'd run out to the community, distribute the posters. Advanced students would continue doing posters and I was there for 4 years, and then I decided, I thought that Chicano Studies, or the whole Ethnic Studies Department, was going into a direction that I felt was not what Third World Strike was about. We were somehow becoming legitimized within the university. We had to sort of get an okay every time we went to do something. So I thought to myself, we did something wrong here because we're trying to liberate ourselves using the same methods that had been used to keep us out of the university. So how do we do that? How do we work? How do we get going when we have to go through the same things that have been? And I decided, and that's when I decided, Andy Chavran's aunt and I were in Chicano studies at that time, and we both resigned. That's when I went into an alternative university where I started teaching. But all my classes have been classes of activism and in different communities. And I think that's where I'll stop.
Very good. I think it's my turn. It's really difficult. I have to follow up to Professor Montoya. I'd like to start with a citation as an academic. At the end, I'm an academic. I resist that thus we are. Andre Malraux. If I resist individually, I become part of the community in resistance. I want to apologize for being autobiographical, but I think that this is the opportunity to be autobiographical. I came to this country in '72 the first time, and I was immersed in Berkeley in the movement. And then I went back to my country, and I participated in an important movement, not very well known in the US or in Europe, although Kissinger and Nixon were very aware of the movement, and they did everything that they could to defeat the movement, and it was defeated. But during 6 years, I was able to participate in an incredible revolution that was bringing health, education, land, and sort of welfare and a just society to the Peruvian people. In the majority of Peruvian people are indigenous people, Quechua, but there are also 70 ethnic groups that are not considered to be fully citizens. They were not considered to be full citizens of the country. So I got involved in that very seriously, and I was at the university at that time, and so part of the reform were the reform of the university. And so as a young professor, I started by criticizing the way in which teaching was performed. Very colonial, very top-down, very seniorial kind of education. I was educated in a Catholic university, you can imagine. I mean, my boss was the Vatican. And so, nevertheless, in that university, I found the best class on Marxism, which was given to us by the founder of the liberation theology, Padre Gutierrez, who taught us how to read social history and read history with a Marxist lens, and how to combine good evangelical analysis with Marxism. So when I came to the States, I had this in my background, and I didn't intend to be a professor or a teacher. Actually, all my life, when I left the university for the revolution, I became an activist. And I went to Mexico, and I spent 15 years in Mexico being an activist. Finally, I had to come to the States for family reasons, very serious family reason, and I decided, well, maybe this is the only job I can do, because to be an activist in this country is not a viable personal solution. So I decided maybe UC Davis is the place where I can go. And I came because of a wonderful department that was already being formed, was a program at that time, that was founded by two incredible leaders, intellectual and spiritual leaders, Dave Brisling, a Hopa Indian, we can say California Indian, so it's not bad to use the term Indians for California Indian, and Jack Force, another native intellectual and scholar who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, 1 year ago. And the program that I found was incredible. It was almost to be in Latin America, because it was a program in resistance. It was a program that was building a form of being an intellectual, an activist, a researcher, a serious researcher, but at the same time being active and being part of the community. Sometimes an imagined community, because I brought the idea that part of the community of ours should be Latin America, South America, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Peru, Ecuador. And so we created a hemispheric approach to the study of native people. Indigenous people are from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. And there are 40, 50, 60 million people that have been suffered colonialism, racism. And for centuries, they have been slaughtered, they have been subject to genocide, and so on. And so the study of the indigenous issue, indigenous people issue, Native American issue, became the study of colonialism and the study of imperialism. Don't forget that this country has invaded Nicaragua 5 times, has invaded Mexico 3 or 4, I lost the country, has invaded Honduras, etc., etc., etc. The Philippines, you name it. For some reason, we have the highest number of military installation all over the world. All over the world. Thousands of American military and drones, etc., etc. So, from that point of view, I was in a department that we became a graduate program in which it was possible to be an intellectual, a scholar, but also an activist. And I was lucky. I was lucky because in this country it's very difficult to be able to combine those two dimensions of human life. I would have hated to be only an intellectual, and I would have left and go back to probably Peru. I couldn't have gone back to Peru, but Mexico. Mexico is a very hospitable, wonderful country, full of wonderful people. So, and that is what my participation in the struggle of the student has been. A little bit distant, because I was much more active with students in 68. I earned my PhD in 67, so just think how old I am. 68 was an important year. The Tlatelolco slaughter, 500 students killed, 500, not 2, 5, 4, 500 students in Tlatelolco, in Mexico City. The uprising in Paris, or the revolution in Paris, France was paralyzed during days by the student and worker strike. And 68 is also a very important date for the American Indian movement. It's an important, or those years are important for the civil rights movement. And those are the years in which ethnic studies took form and shape. Now, never in the history, in the recent history of humanity, since capitalism became the dominant way of living, social progress has been received as a gift by a generous elite. I would like to use the term oligarchy for the US. We are really in an oligarchy nation state. There is not only oligarchy in Russia. We like to say, oh, the Russian oligarchs, after the collapse of communism, they are oligarchs. We have plenty of oligarchs, 1% are oligarchs. And they're oligarchs in the real sense that they really control the country and the institution and the government as oligarchs to their own service. So, this story has to be shortened, but what can we do? What can we do to resist? So, let's go back to the idea that nothing has been ever given to the people as a gift. Just remember what happened in Chicago in 1886, 87. 5 anarchists were executed. There was what we celebrate in Latin America and the rest of the world as the 1st of May, Fiesta del Trabajo. Here we don't celebrate that. But the Martyr of Chicago took place in Chicago. And there was a general strike with 400,000 people in the street of Chicago. And that was to fight for a work day of 8 hours. Something that now we think, wow, everybody should work 8 hours, no more than 8 hours. Well, people have to die in order to receive that wonderful gift from the oligarchy. And so the 500 students that died in Mexico in Tlatelolco in 1968, they died for things that are very simple. The right to have free education, public education, the right to co-participate in the government of the university. In 1918, Cordoba, Argentina, the famous university revolution. It was a revolution. The students took the university and said, okay, we want free public education, we want co-government, we want to participate in the government of the university. The university is as much our university as yours, administrators and faculty. And we don't want army and police in the university. 1918, in 6 years we can celebrate 100 years of that revolution. What have we achieved in the University of California? We have police, we don't have co-government, we don't have the army yet, but very soon we may have. And that's it. 100 years. We are still at the same point when the student in Cordoba were with them. So, now, in 2 minutes, let's face the issue of race and ethnicity. I think that in this country we have been tricked into think that there is no class struggle. There is only racial struggle. That's wrong. That's wrong. There is class struggle because there are very rich and wealthy African American, very rich and wealthy Chicano, Latino, very rich and wealthy Asian American, and there are the 90% or 99 poor African American. So class analysis is what explains this country. It's not the color of my skin. The color of my skin doesn't explain my position. That is trick ourselves. False consciousness, the old good Marx would call it. False consciousness. So that's my message.
I think it's very helpful to have people talk about their own personal experiences, because it's from our own personal experience that we see that we regain the reality. I just want to mention just a couple items. I grew up with a Indian reservation. And I wondered, what was I doing at a reservation? Well, it was just me. There were 125 other immigrant families from Japan on the Yakima reservation. And the reason was the alien land laws. These laws were passed to stop the competition of very productive immigrant families from Japan. And 17 states passed these laws. And the way the law was written was not, it was anti-Japanese. It just said people not qualified for citizenship cannot lease or buy land. No immigrant from Asia could become a citizen of the United States until 1952. So it was a very convenient way to discriminate. Most of the immigrants in Japan were farmers. And because they couldn't become a citizen, a lot of these people could not get land to farm. However, the Indian reservations came under the Department of Interior, so they were now subject to the state laws. And that's why these immigrants, my family included, were on this reservation. I just mentioned that as kind of a starting point, because you start realizing what it takes to, be with other people. And I remember we were living with other Indians on the same land, and at that time, many of the Yakimas were still speaking Yakima language. And the immigrants from Japan were not speaking English, they were speaking Japanese. And I asked my mom, how do you talk to old Tom? because we were in the same place. She said, oh yeah, we used our hands. But there was one more language that both sides understood. It was called baseball. The reservation had a team that was called Yakima Indians. And then the immigrants had a team called Walter Nippons. So when I found out about the Major League, I thought, boy, the Indians are pretty good. I think I'll go for Cleveland. Then I found out there was no Indians playing for Cleveland at all. It was just a name. And I found out that it wasn't, the names I knew identified people and where they're from. But then I found out baseball teams, there are animals and pieces of clothing playing for, for baseball teams. And when I was in high school, I was on the baseball team. All my teams were really gung-ho for New York Yankees. Then I found out why. Because who were my teammates? Their names were Romero, Trifolo, Fantozzi, so on. And at that time, the Yankees had Phil Rizzuto, Yogi Berra, Joe DiMaggio. So they're really rooting for the New York Italians. So that's the kind of sense that people do have this kind of very important identity, and it's very important to really build on that. And one of the more interesting insights I had about the whole situation of race relations in this country was when I was teaching chemistry at the high school level. Before that, I had been a reporter in Korea, a U.S. Army reporter. And at that time, the Soviet Union sent up Sputnik. And when I came back, I found that people were really scared. They said, well, what are we going to beat the Russians? And their answer was, we need to beef up a high school science program and catch up with the Russians. And one way to do that was send all the high school teachers of science back to school with these special institutes. Because I was teaching chemistry, I was getting all these pamphlets from different college universities. But I knew that something else was going on. Besides the revolution in science, there was this whole civil rights movement, because just previous to that, there was a Montgomery bus boycott. And just before in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that all these schools that were segregated were not just segregated, they were unequal also. So I figured, well, if I'm going to go to one of the institutes, I think I'll go to a place where I can study both science and civil rights. So I found a black school to go to. It was Howard University in Washington, D.C. And except for two nuns in Chicago, everybody else in that group, this is Special Radiation Biology Institute, were all teaching in segregated schools in the South. And instead of hearing lectures, all I had to do was talk to my classmates, and I found out what they're up against. Like one guy, he's a real big, he made little All-American football, playing for Langston Hughes, which is a black college in Oklahoma. And I asked him, hey, how'd you get to Washington? He says, I picked up a guy in Texas, and we had a big number 10 grocery bag full of peanut butter sandwiches and drove nonstop. I said, why'd you do that? Well, we stopped for gas, and we asked for the toilet. And he said, well, there's one for you guys over there, but it's busted. And he says, we didn't want to ask any questions. If you didn't like it, you could frame us for rape. And that was a condition of the country. This is 1960. I would ask another guy, hey, how'd you get started in teaching science? He said, well, when I graduated from Alabama A&T, another black college, he said, well, I can take the test for the post office, or I can teach at a segregated school. All right? Well, I asked another, what kind of supplies did you have teaching chemistry? So we didn't have any, but we recycle all the litmus paper. All of you have taken chemistry to get here. Litmus paper, it's crap, you throw it away. These people are recycling litmus paper. All right? So that was the kind of, so to mention is just by looking around, talking to people, you get a sense of what the realities are. I just want to pick up on comments made by both Malachi and Stefano about 1968. It's a pretty significant year. I came here in 1967, and in 1968, the world really started changing. I'll give you some brief examples. First of all, we were at war, and the Viet Cong start attacking the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. In other words, the war had changed from a jungle war to the cities. And Walter Cronkite was the major announcer on CBS. He went there, and he realized that all the information we're getting from our generals and our government officials were really fake. And he says, we really got to renegotiate, get out of that war. But the Tet Offensive was what changed people in this country about the attitude towards the war. But that was 1968. Picking up on Stefano said about the massacre of students, one of the reasons why they're trying to suppress in Mexico, they have to keep the country kind of clear and clean for the Olympics. The 1968 Olympics are in Mexico City in October. And that's the Olympics where Tommy Smith and John Collis got up when they got to work with the Black Power salute. Because they did that to awaken people to the inequities in this country and to bring attention to the civil rights movement. There was a Miss America contest in September of that year, and the women's movement protested. They didn't want women to be treated as commodity. It's not just beauty that counts. But earlier in the year, Martin Luther King was helping out sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. In April, he got assassinated. In June, Robert Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency of the United States for the Democratic Party. He got assassinated. So you got all these different kind of amazing events occurring in 1968. And talk about, you know, the start of the ethnic studies movement. This all came about because of the situation was so drastic that the country was burning up. 120 cities in America had riots or fires, many of them in urban neighborhoods. And so the question was, what can people do? And this brings it home, because UC Davis was considered a kind of a rural school. And I'll give you a background, a little bit about UC Davis in 1968. You know, we didn't even have this kind of paper. You know what this paper is? Photocopy paper. We didn't have this. Everything that professors used run off a mimeograph machine. We had this very, you know, absorbent paper. This was not even run. There was no such thing as Japanese cars yet. There were Hondas, but they were motorcycles. Right? There's a whole bunch of other things that I think we kind of take for granted here. There's no public transport in Davis. But we have some very creative students by there, Bob Black and Richard Klecker. And figured the students in town spreading out. So they started to get some buses. So they called London up, and they got 10 used double-decker buses. That was 1960. Just sitting out in the garage here. I don't think I ever met any student from Southern California. This is a regional school. All that is called University of California. It's really kind of a Northern California school. At that time, the Davis reputation is based on agriculture, so we did get foreign visitors, because mainly for ag. The medical school had just opened, and just a year before, I guess the year I came, law school opened up, all right? So that was kind of the context. So after these riots started, what did UC Davis do? We had a chancellor named Marac, and he came up with the idea that, you know, Davis really ought to respond to this whole thing called the urban crisis. So you know what happened? They declared no classes for 4 days, moratorium on classes. And everybody got out in the quad and the Walman Hall and started discussing, what does a place like Davis do to respond to the urban crisis? And you know what came out of that? Some pretty amazing stuff. First of all, the UC Davis Law School changed its name. It's called Martin Luther King School of Law now. College of Agriculture also expanded its name to College of Agricultural and Environmental Studies. But that's where also the push for women's studies and ethnic studies came about. So I just want to give this as kind of a context that, you know, a year like 1960, all three of us have mentioned it, and yet that was a very important year for UC Davis, because that's where this all started. So I think I want to stop here and open up for, we'll pick up more later on. But I think knowing our history, knowing our, paying attention to our own personal experiences, knowing what our friends went through, looking around, like, you know, what my experience at Howard University, you know, growing up on the Indian Reservation, they become sources of really insight. And they're very powerful. You don't have to, so I would say, look around you. We have a lot to learn from each other. And that's the basis of ethnic studies.
I appreciate hearing about 1968. In 1967 and 1968, my mom was part of the occupation of UC Berkeley, and my dad was part of the Oakland draft card riot. So I also appreciate hearing about that year. I'd like to talk about student activism on campus this year and student movements in different places in the world. In the context of privatization. So in the fall of this year, students at Davis began an occupation of the quad in solidarity with occupations of private spaces all over the country and the world, specifically in solidarity with those students and professors at UC Berkeley who have been brutalized by riot cops on November 9th. I was at home with a fever on November 18th when I got calls reporting stories of my friends having pepper spray forced down their throat, having their faces burned by pepper spray, long-lasting damage done to their wrists by zip ties. As I watched videos of riot police using illegally obtained military-grade weapons on my friends, people on the internet debated whether or not "fuck the police" was an appropriate response. In fact, it seemed completely appropriate. In the days following November 18th, thousands of students voted on a proposal at a General Assembly to make UC Davis an autonomous and police-free campus. As I took the names of those students who wanted to speak on the stack, numerous women came up with me to ask if they could speak to the fact that as victims of sexual assault, campus police had the opposite effect of making them feel safer. Though nothing came of that proposal, gathering together to talk about the possibility for an autonomous university based on other historical models was very powerful. Later in the fall, we occupied Dutton Hall to bring attention to the privatization of the university, specifically of the cashier's office in which students make checks payable to the UC Regents. We formed a series of free teach-ins and dissent lectures at Paulo Freire Open University in honor of Paulo Freire and his theories of critical and liberatory pedagogy. During these weeks at the Open University, I attended classes on Frantz Fanon's theory of decolonization, the history of the American Indian movement, radical labor history at the turn of the 20th century, the Third World Liberation Front, the 1968 student strike, the rhetoric of torture at Guantanamo, and a discursive analysis of the administrative speak of a letter from Camp Psychoteki. It might be worth noting that these classes, taught for free by very enthusiastic professors, would have cost $500 to $1,000 were they offered through the university. Like the students who seized control of their universities in Latin America through what they call tomas, the dissent lectures in the Paulo Freire Open University offered a glimpse of a future in which public universities are run by their students and their faculty and provide an education to those who want it. In the winter, we occupied a building that formerly housed the Cross Cultural Center. Our vision for this space was a truly safe space for radical community organizing, free from police, administration, and task forces sent to spy on our organizing. We imagined that we could create a real student center with a library of resistance history with spaces for free classes. Many of us were concerned with basic mutual aid that could be offered for struggling students. Points of solidarity were written on the chalkboards inside the building, which declared our intentions for the space: anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-white supremacist, anti-patriarchal, etc. And as many of you know, 11 students and one professor are facing criminal charges associated with the blockade of the U.S. Bank. Their court case prevents me from speaking in depth about this, but I would really like people to think about what it means when a public university enters into a relationship, a business partnership, with a private bank. What it means when our supposedly public university sells a private bank our student debt. and therefore eliminates any possibility for these crippling student fee increases to ever end. I'd like to talk for a second about what's happening in Quebec, in Montreal. This is the little solidarity square that everyone in Quebec is wearing right now. This past February, students began a one-week strike in protest of an attempted 75% fee increase. If we'll recall, the UC Regents tried to do this this past November, identically a 75% fee increase. Their one-week strike turned into a full-time strike against privatization and austerity by students, professors, and workers, which is now almost in its 4th month. So students in Quebec, about 300,000 of them, have been on full-time strike, not going to their classes since February. And an additional 250,000 are on part-time strike. At one point, riot police attempted to open the university back up, which had been closed by students and professors, and the janitors union closed it back down. The mainstream media represents the strike as a student protest, if they represent it at all, but it's becoming increasingly clear that this is not just a student protest and not just a student movement. Professors, janitors, and university staff had joined the strike. Neighbors hanged their aprons, dish towels, and flags out their windows as a symbol of solidarity with those striking full-time. On May 18th, 2 new draconian anti-strike laws were passed in Montreal. One is a municipal bylaw which prohibits the wearing of masks at demonstrations, punishable by fines of $1,000 to $5,000. The second is a special law which demands that demonstrators in Quebec inform the local police about the start time and the route of any march that they're planning at least 8 hours in advance. The second law also prohibits protests on the grounds of universities and academic institutions, again with fines up to $10,000. The day after these emergency totalitarian laws took effect, hundreds of thousands of students and workers and professors turned out into the streets of Montreal to say that they would not be intimidated by these laws, that they would refuse to submit. The students and workers in Montreal have taken the issues of austerity and privatization, particular to the situation within the university, and through months of solidarity have helped create a resistance movement that is far larger than a student movement, which rejects police and state repression and the violent enforcement of austerity. The conditions that created the movement in Montreal are very similar, almost identical to conditions in California at the UC, in the CSUs, and the community colleges, and in fact, in higher public education all over the world. Students in Montreal, in Chile, in Mexico, in Puerto Rico, and in Europe are all part of the same struggle. The time is now to work together to attack the dual forces of privatization and austerity as they operate within the university. Clearly, the public education system is one of the last frontiers to be subsumed by capital. We can see the process of privatization all around us, in the cuts to valued programs, to the precarity of all of our programs, to the fee increases and the inevitable pushing out of poor students, students of color. A few weeks ago, it was revealed that Governor Brown and UC President Mark Yudof have been having closed-door meetings to determine the future of the UC system and to set up a plan for total privatization. Tuition will predictably increase, and the UC will no longer promise the state of California that it will admit a fixed number of California students every year. And it will acquire new taxpayer money for new capital projects. We need to start seriously imagining what total privatization of the UC, the CSU, and community colleges will look like. We need to consider how it will affect generations of Californians and their ability to get an education. Total privatization means a completely different student body. Total privatization means the homogenization of the public university. Privatization will mean that our classrooms will be filled with out-of-state, foreign students, those who can afford a private education, our classrooms will become white, wealthy, and politically apathetic. We need to not pretend that nothing can be done about privatization and that it's an option not to do anything, because precarity will only get worse and solidarity is the only solution.
So going off your last name of solidarity, so I came here in 2007, coming in with the year before where there was the Sodexo protest. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but I seen the pictures. It was so beautiful. You have people of all walks of life, all student orgs coming together in solidarity. And then I was excited to be in Davis. I was like, wow, you know, radical school. And then for some reason when I got here, the solidarity between the student orgs seemed to kind of fade out. So I would make ties here and there and meet other people, but I always wondered why isn't there, you know, that same fire that was there from the years before of solidarity and things of that sort. And then 2009 came, and we had the action against the budget increase and the fee hikes and tuition and the regents and all that jazz. And the MU was beautiful. You had students from all walks of life coming together in solidarity, you know, marching hand in hand, and it was like my dream had come true. So, sorry. Yeah, all right. So then November 18th comes about, and I'm going to be just talking about different actions that I've experienced here on this campus. November 18th comes, and again, there seems to be a loss in, you know, coming together and understanding the struggles and things of that sort. And that's actually been a big feeling for me, like, of sadness. I keep saying that, but just that there really isn't any more what we were talking about. The speakers were saying that, you know, we mobilized, there was this, there was that, there's Quebec, you know, and then there just seems to be a lack of mobilization here. And so, yeah. And then I understand that there's a lot of dilemmas. Like, I'm a part of Students for Justice in Palestine, and being an Arab American Palestinian woman on this campus has not been easy. Being an activist on campus isn't always easy. You have administrators and policing, you know, what you can and cannot say. We have free speech here, and, you know, but then, like, for example, the Stand With Us event that happened in February was an event where 2 Israeli soldiers came in to talk about their time as soldiers and things like that. So students protested, they had a silent walkout. A few days later, the president of the UC system comes out with a statement condemning the action. He says, "I condemn the action of those who would disrupt this event." So right then and there, you're like, oh wait, why can't I protest? So like, it's like now the beginning of the policing of what you can and cannot say. He then goes on to say that it was wrong for vandals on the UC Riverside campus to deface the Israeli flag displaced by Jewish student orgs, Hillel. He applauds the chancellor for rapid, vigorous condemnation of this cowardly act. If you look at here on this campus, there was the Palestinian dove, or the peace dove, on the Third World Forum, like, mural. It was branded with the Star of David. When students showed their being upset with this and addressed this to the chancellor, they were sent to Vice Chancellor Reed. He gave out a statement, but it seems that when students of color, or when students who are, you know, something like this, they can't go directly to the chancellor. There was no UC-wide statement, there was no, campus-wide statement. So then that was early on, this was back in 2009, around the same time. And as an activist, it was another like harsh slap in the face that for me coming from the Arab American community, we can't have our voices be heard. That the university will pick and choose what they want to make as, something really bad or something, we can just brush aside. In Udolph's letter to the campus, he then said that he would like to work with, he says, we are also working with the Museum of Tolerance and the Anti-Defamation League to improve campus climate for all the students to take full advantage of our marvelous diversity. Unfortunately, the Museum of Tolerance is being built on a Palestinian gravesite in Palestine. The ADL considers SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, as like, it's on their hit list in a way. So again, it seems that the campus is then using or going to organizations, the Museum of Tolerance and the ADL, to work with, but it's completely against the students. So that's another form of policing of what the students can say, what they can do. After a while, I began to feel that I shouldn't even speak out anymore. At events, you can have administrators come and, in a way, intimidate us. People from the campus, CEVES, the Campus and Event Services will come and just sit and then say, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And again, they're policing your movement. Where's our free speech at that point? And it's been difficult. I keep thinking it's always difficult. As a student activist, to encourage others to come together if they're constantly feeling like, all right, if I say this, there's going to be an entire UC-wide letter that's going to come out like, condemning my actions, or I don't want to do that because then the administration will pepper spray us. There doesn't seem to be a proper outlet for the students. I guess I take that back. This could be our outlet, of course. But we're constantly being attacked by the administration, and it's so frustrating to feel like that. As students, we want to get our education, we want to get our voices heard. We're always told, be unique, speak your mind, all this jazz. But when it finally gets down to it, when you're saying, end the occupation in Palestine, when you're saying, we have rights and all this stuff, the administration's like, that don't fly right with me, so maybe you should stop, or, get pepper sprayed, get arrested. So my, I guess, my feeling and what I'd like to come from this, and then maybe we can address it during the Q&A session. What ways can we unify together again, like 2006, like Quebec, like the beautiful stories here, which coincidentally, 68 was an interesting year. For Palestine, that was the year that my parents had to leave because of the war, so I feel like I have to say it's 1968, 1967 story. But, I'm just wondering, I guess we can address it now and go into the Q&A then. Y'all opinions on if I'm allowed to do that. Okay. Just what can we do to finally unite and be in solidarity with each other? I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. I used to say, it's because I'm black, because I came from a Black Panther Party school. So I'd say, it's because I'm black, that's why you're, and my mom would be like, you're Arab, you're not black. But there was no difference to me whether you were black. I grew up calling California Mexico del Norte. It was so we were always as one. And I mean, in the end, we're all humans, regardless of race, regardless of class. We're all humans in the end. So I never found myself not wanting to, support the LGBT community in their struggles, support Chicana in their struggles, I may not be a part of that community, but as a human being and as, just being human, doing something that's right, I always felt the need to bring the struggle or be a part of the struggle, and So I guess, what are y'all feelings on that? Because that's something that, which is completely against what I was actually about to say, but like, see, that's something that for so many years now I've just been wondering, what can we do to really become, you know, come together in solidarity, come together and really truly, like, I'll say as beautiful as the SJP wall last year. I don't know if any of y'all were there. It was such a beautiful wall. It was connecting Palestine's struggle. It was connecting the struggles of students and student debt and giving all this aid, you know, to a country that we as America, we ain't got no business being in there. We ain't got no business sending them $700 a day, you know? It was connecting Mexico. It was connecting Asian Pacific Islander struggles. It was so beautiful. That was like my baby for the year. And I would want that to happen again. So I guess now we can start. I keep saying that. But yeah.
We're going to turn it over to the Q&A, and Professor Wendy is going to be moderating. But I just wanted to say quickly that we really appreciate the time of several faculty who are actually supposed to be enjoying their retirement and shouldn't actually be running around the campus. But we are so honored to have you here and to have Fatima and Nathania. I mean, that was so inspiring. It was just very moving for me. We're going to have a reception after a little bit. But I also just want to mention that we actually invited several faculty from all the programs and departments in our hall, and many of them, including some of our senior female colleagues, unfortunately were not able to be here. As also Stella Mancias, who was not feeling well, so we missed them, but we're going to record this event, and we hope that other people can watch it. So hand it over to...
Right. Well, I don't think you really need me, but thank you for all sharing your experiences. But if you have questions to ask, I think there were a number of questions asking what can we do as allies and in coalition with each other around a number of problematic areas of concern. So are there any questions? Raise your hand. Yes.
I actually don't
Why don't you
know.
identify yourself?
Oh, okay. Hi, so my name is Leah. I'm Southeast Asian. I'm Hong. I'm a senior here at UC Davis in the Asian American Studies Department and a CRD minor. Okay, so going back to your question about what can we do, I think that, and this question has been actually circulating this year, is that, or not really a question, but comment that, and critique that students, staff, faculty, there is this disconnect between as students and as department. We see UC Davis as this hierarchy, and and the students feel that they're down here on the bottom, and faculty and staff are up here. And that makes us afraid to critique and talk and approach our professors and staff. And I feel that this is a huge issue, and that's the reason why we have, because as students we're not talking to professors, they don't know, they don't see our issues until something dramatic and drastic happens. And by then I feel like it is too late. So I think that we need to not be afraid to approach our staff and faculty and say, listen to us, this is what is happening, teach this, talk about it, teach it. Because I feel like what I'm learning in my ASA classes right now are mostly from the 60s and 70s. And not that they're not irrelevant, it's just that it's harder for me to relate to social issues that are not within the 90s and on. So I think that that's something that we should, I guess, new source material that needs to be addressed. And that can create, and that can cultivate new ideas, new mindsets on how do we educate the other students. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take sets of 3 questions so that they'll have a number of questions to answer.
I don't actually have a question, I have a comment. I mean, the fact that we're even here is a manifestation of the fact that we are minorities and the system keeps us compartmentalized, every man for his own. And so you're just explaining it in other ways, in other words, but it's like It's gonna always be, colonialism has always survived because of divide and rule. If they always can have the LGBT against the black or the black against the Latino and the war in this country is a war for opportunity. Like you said, it's class. They're gonna keep us down. Education is our ticket to the middle class, and they're gonna keep that away from you. So if we can just eliminate these barriers of we are all minorities and underprivileged. Whether you're white, you're Latino, you're black like me, the only way our ticket to the middle class is education. And when we put that first, then we can find reason to meet together on one thing. It's like capitalism is taking over universities, taking over education. So the war should be the war for opportunity, the opportunity to express your views, the opportunity to include yourself in anything, the opportunity to, so by that way we would break all classes. Let's don't fool ourselves. Davis in 1975 was the first university that pushed back on affirmative action. That can be explained. So it's not like there's not an institutional mode towards dividing people against each other based on race. It's always been, but if we can unite on the basis of opportunity and say it's no more about race, it's about all opportunity. They're privatizing the university and they're killing opportunity for the future generation. I think that will make us close ranks better on that front, whether you're white, green, blue, or black, I think.
Okay, Manuel?
Hi, my name is Ahmed Zuki. I want just in sort of going off what Fulton was saying. I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing a lot of diverse faces around here, and it shows that we're all here. We all really do care. So what I was wondering, and this is kind of an out loud question sort of everyone. I know Fulton was on it. The Third World Coalition happened in 2009. I'm wondering if people are open to reviving that group right here, right now. Like, how many organizations are down to sign up and say, we'll put our organization back, we'll get the Third World Coalition started up again, and bring, like, sort of bring that back and revive it? Because I know there's sort of a disconnect from last year. And I know Sunaina knows a lot about it as well. She's one of the faculty here who can sort of maybe bring in more faculty as well and provide that connect between faculty and students that we sort of seem to be missing, and sort of we can learn from the mistakes of the old Third World Coalition and sort of put that into the new one. So that's something that I just want to bring out.
I could really hear everything that he was saying. Was he addressing anyone in particular? Or?
No, it's open to all of you if you'd like to respond.
Well, I'd like to just make a comment because I couldn't hear everything that you were saying. I'd like to make just a general comment and answer some of the why, where do we go, what do we do. I think we have to remember where we're at, where we fit. You live in a society that allows you to be a revolutionary in the morning and then lets you participate in all the evil that capitalism has to offer in the evening. And so that creates a schizophrenic individual. And you're walking here and you're allowed to do that. As a poster maker and as a political artist, I do things that people say, you're so lucky you live here, Malachias. You couldn't do this kind of work elsewhere. And I said, one of the reasons they allow me to do this is because they know that after people leave my exhibitions, they're going to go and tune into their latest whatever. They're going to go to the mall. They have that already planned. So as Paulo Freire said, to be in the struggle, you have to almost like die and be born again within that struggle, which means you have to lose everything that has been fed to you by, and that's very hard to do. That's very hard to do because you have to shed yourself of all those things, ego, jealousy, all those things, and you have to almost like be reborn again and to be able to really struggle. Otherwise, it's very difficult. And so we've been struggling since the 30s, the 20s, the 40s, and we're still in a situation. That lets you know that something was not going right most of the time, because we're back in the same thing. Here we've had ethnic studies since what, 1969, 68, 69. And we're still dealing with, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that, we're going to lose this. It doesn't change. But the struggle, and I agree, has to be a continuous struggle, but you have to yourself, you have to change. You have to become that different person and say, this is what I'm in it for this reason. And that's the one thing that most of us cannot do because we're so, we're given too much, we have too much. I don't know how else to say it. It sounds terrible that we have too much. Everybody should be happy because we have too much. But it's that having too much that sets you in other directions. It sets up a weakness in you. It destroys part of you. And that's why, and they can use me. They see Malaquias, we allow Malaquias to do posters. Look at it. What a country he lives in, you know. But they know that. They know. I'll give you one.
I would like to address the first intervention, the disconnect between faculty and students, and what faculty do and what students are supposed to learn from the faculty. I think this is a major issue, and Malaquias told us wonderful stories on how we could really change our teaching style. I think that the burden of teaching that is not only on the faculty, it's on the interaction between faculty and students. You have to be brave enough to interrupt the class, to question the syllabus. Question the syllabus. What are we learning here? I mean, economics 1 is what? Adam Smith, actualizado, I would say, updated, and sociology is what? I don't know, because I don't take those classes. So, you really have to question the syllabus, a professor, be brave. I mean, the worst that may happen is that you get a C, right? But if you do a good job, you will get an A. I can guarantee. I see passive students. I've been teaching, what, 20 years now here. You know, and I taught in Latin America. In Latin America, you can't, I mean, you enter a class and you are immediately questioned. Immediately. Because you are the power. And so the students are powerless? No. They in Latin America, and I'm talking of Peru, 1967, 68, 69, I left Peru in 75. The student grabbed the little power that is available and they exercise the power. And you have to do that. You are paying. Your parents are investing a lot of money. I have 2 children and I pay for the school. And so you know, if we put it in terms of market economy, this is a market. And so in a market, you have the right to question the salesperson, whatever it is offering you the product. So they want to be neoliberal. Let's be neoliberal all the way. So you students have to question the system, question the professor, question the syllabus, question the readings. Why aren't we reading fundamental works that are Howard Zinn? How many of us have read the history, people history of the US, the US people history, whatever is the title of Howard Zinn book? Is it signed, that book? How many people have read Polanyi in Economics 1? Karl Polanyi, that revolutionized the way to look at it. How many people have read Marx? How many students have been assigned a little bit of Marx here, a little bit of Lenin there, a little bit of the Sandinista revolution here and there? So, this is not a process of brainwashing. You're not here to become neoliberals in your art. You are here to contest the system. And so that's your job, and hopefully you'll find few faculty that are responsive.
I just want to pick up on, comment on a couple of words that are very important in terms of taking action. With struggle and vigilance. You know, it may have sounded very good to mention that after the urban crisis, you know, we said, look, let's talk it over, 4-day moratorium. It sounded like a real good deal. However, the real work came after that. Because one thing is for a university to say, let's talk things over, come up with the idea. Another one is to implement them. To implement ethnic studies was a real battle. Ed Turner was a very black professor on the campus here. So he was called on a lot to talk about a lot of things. And he was asked about just race relations. And you know how he started off his lecture? He put a license number on the blackboard. That license number was a number for the Davis police car that followed him every night after he left campus. That was the atmosphere in 1960. This is in the 1960s, 70s. I make sure we're vigilant because whatever you're doing, you want to keep on moving because things may go backwards. About 15 years ago, there was a kind of a real right-wing attack on ethnic studies. And somebody made a poster showing the photographs of the 4th chair of ethnic studies with the room number. All right? This became very dangerous because somebody sees that and says, well, you don't like me, you can trash their office, whatever. So the university has put security in a building, and it still continues. That building is Hart Hall. All right? Go every night, and you'll find security people here. They've gone on for 15 years now. That's what I mean by vigilance. You don't take things for granted. You really have to keep on working, and you have to work together. When we first started Ethnic Studies program, the 4 people that were involved, there was Jack Forbes in Arab American Studies, Ed Turner in Black Studies, Jesus Leyva in Chicano Studies, and myself. And we came up with an approach. We said, look at, you're ever going to start helping Ethnic Studies, start giving money. If the money comes down, no arguments, no saying who's better than the other is more deserving. We divide the money equally. And you don't get any kind of battle about divide and conquer. And that's what you're going to do. If you're in any kind of movement or struggle, minorities, women, all that, you really have to work together. And that's the approach we took when we first started these programs off. And I think we try to maintain that kind of approach. People connecting with each other, talking to each other, sharing things, helping each other out. So this whole idea about keep the struggle going, always be vigilant. Don't take things for granted. You've got to work together.
Anybody else? Did you want to say something?
Yeah,
about
sure.
the next thing?
Just on the questioning.
Thank you so much.
That is, if we're not questioning like the authority. I remember in 4th grade, my elementary school teacher told me when everyone was talking about colleges and this and that, and I'm coming from a family, my mom didn't finish high school, you know, none of that. And we were talking about this, she goes, I think you're dreaming a little too big, Fatima. I'm just letting you know, people from your part of the world, you guys don't get educated. And you'll probably just end up in the house, getting married, having kids. And I was like, bitch, say what? I go home and I'm like, Mom, what the heck, you know? I'm like, am I supposed to get married soon? Like, what, you know? And that was like one of the first times I remember just as a person of color and having that, you know, just the stereotypes that go around to put you down, like starting from then. You're a little kid at that point. And I feel like for me, that's what caused me just to keep wanting to just break the stereotypes, break these barriers and things of that sort. But it also like made me want to question everything that they said, because you can't take what they say, they being like you're educated. I'm not y'all educated, you guys are amazing. But you know, just you need to question what is said to you and don't take it as, you know, all right, she says I'm not gonna make it, so I'm not gonna make it, you know. And I feel like coming from a community where especially the Latino and African American brothers, they have no hope, or at least we didn't when we were younger, and still to this day. There was no encouragement, you know. Like that license plate, they always said, the second I walked outside, the cops are stopping me, you know, hey, what are you doing? So it was difficult to be a person of color, especially a male, growing up. So yeah, I'm on the same line with that. But.
I don't know if everyone can hear me or not, but I have a little bit to say, and I'm just curious to get your perspective. So, about the police following someone situation, a little bit ago I asked the chief of the police of Davis to tell me if my department has called the cops on me and how many times, and he said that he would do so right away. And then I never got a response after he got my name and my information, because there was an instance when they called cops on me once, and now, in my presumption, there's been many instances of being followed, so that's just kind of an interesting perspective to live with as a grad student. I'm a grad student in the dramatic arts department. I have like pretty high GPA, and I'm getting disqualified for failing a thesis. It's a performance thesis, but I haven't been given due cause to be able to like repeat it or anything. So and in this particular department, coincidentally, every single African male has been kicked out. The quarter before me, one person was put in jail because he had Scantrons, and he said, "This is a bomb, you guys." Even though all 13 students says he was joking, 3 students told the cops that it wasn't a joke, so he stayed in jail. And he almost had a criminal record for this. And then before him, another African student got kicked out. So I'm the third person in this row of silliness happening. And they first tried to dismiss me from the university, but somehow they didn't know how to do that properly. So then they changed it to a disqualification. So what a disqualification means to me is that once I'm disqualified, it means I can't go into, it's going to make it almost impossible for me to get into another university. And so here's a student who has almost all my classes are A's in MFA and PhD courses. They never gave me a progress report for my first year, which is mandatory. They sent it in like maybe last week, and the graduate office finally said, okay, that seems silly. But they've done a million other things. So if you're looking for, not to kind of steal your attention, but if you're looking for something you want to mobilize around, I think this might be particularly interesting. But if not, no worries. But but also, what concerns me about this is not only like what are they setting precedents on how to dismiss people without due process, which might be concerning. What concerns me is like with a track record this strong, why hasn't, and I actually would have to maybe disagree a little bit, because in the sense of I'm not speaking or sharing my perspective in class, I think that is particularly what got me into this position, because I never raise my voice, I don't yell, but if I disagree with you, I would respectfully say there's something I don't understand about this is my perspective. And doing that for 2 years is something that has been counter to like staying in the university, and this is what created this much animosity, because there's a presumption or a belief that my presence, although they kind of like my work and they brought me into the department, I wasn't supposed to ever say something that was counter to challenge. So it's something that's very present, and so I'm supposed to turn in my dismissal form on the 14th of this month, and then when I turned it in, it has very systematic, clear reasoning of why, like, there is anything that was ever, there's nothing that they have against me that could justify the reasoning. The most they've come up with is I have an inability to communicate, so I wouldn't even be able to repeat because of my communication issues. So just so I don't lose my mind, I have to check all my instances of communication, and I have a billion like clear emails that say we're talking. There's no way this is happening. So to keep the story short, there isn't any kind of valuable reason apart from, to my perspective, racism and also like kind of a animosity. But I'm curious, so then beyond if you want to support what's happening with me because it's present and it's probably contemporary because it's happening today, I'm curious, on a side note, I'm wondering if you professors who are here, if you've ever been interested in being in a graduate studies program and like legitimizing it and having, instead of a graduate group or a group without a degree, like how do you become people who make the decisions? Like, so because if you're if you have a graduate program, there's a strength to that. Then if you're in a graduate council, there's a strength to that. Because when I read the policies in the graduate councils about, sorry, I'm almost done. When I read the policies, the most important thing in graduate councils about what they feel is important, they say diversity is important for diversity, but they make it very clear that it has nothing to do with with our educational process. Now, this is something I just presumed wasn't true, but reading a paper just kind of gives an obvious kind of madness. So.
Okay, we're running short of time, so there's 2 short questions and then we'll have the panel respond. You had one question?
I have a comment.
Okay, short?
Yeah, it'll be really short.
Third.
Okay, I just wanted to address Fatima's question in the beginning on how we can build solidarity. And my only comment to that is a lot of the problems that we have are there are a lot of the older generations that become involved in a lot of these protests and activist organizations on campus. And the problem is that we don't train the younger generation to understand these problems, and that's where we get stuck, because we're in a unique position where we're only here for 4 or 5 years and then we leave. And we do our own education and things that motivated us here, but we never train the younger generation, and so they have to learn again in another 4 years, and then they leave. And so it's just this and the faculty, they know that that we're only here for a short amount of time, and we're gonna leave, and that's all they have to worry about. Oh, this girl, she's coming to tell me about problems in the Muslim community. She's a senior, she's gonna leave. We can just check this off her list, and then not worry about it, because nobody's gonna come and question us later on. Which is a big problem, because we should be training the younger generations in our student organizations or in our activists that are interested in these activist groups, and tell them about what's going on at our time so they can know what we fought for and what we asked administration for, so they can ask them in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. Because the problem is that we leave and we don't come back. We don't come back to ask what happened to our demands. And by the time we're coming back, we don't have a voice here because we're not students. Students have so much power that we don't even understand until maybe our 4th and 5th year. And again, that's when we're terming out. That's when we leave. And again, students don't realize it until it's way too late, and they leave and they don't train the younger generation.
It's a very important point. Thank you so much. And this is why I think that Third World Coalition ideas are important. So one quick question, because the food is here. It's going to get cold. The Fadia study has so. The last question or comment? If you want to respond,
there's
anyone from panel.
Okay, one panel respond, and then we'll go eat.
In the back, maybe first of all, about being profiled. Obviously it's racism, but it's also your potential as an insurrectionary person, and I think that we absolutely should mobilize around your case. We had a comrade in Occupy UC Davis who was an art student who who was arrested by campus police for alleged vandalism, and he was in jail for 3 days before anybody realized where he was. The university didn't bother to tell anyone, or any of his friends or his family, and we only realized where he was when we called the jail and asked if he was in fact in there. After that, he got a letter of dismissal saying that because he didn't take his finals, he was failing and he was being dismissed. He didn't take his finals because the university had him arrested and had him thrown in jail for 3 days. We had a sit-in the dean's office and didn't leave until they said that the dean would meet with him personally. So he had an appointment the next day. The dean readmitted him, said it didn't have anything to do with our sit-in, but they were going to readmit him. We know what that means. So yeah, I absolutely think we should mobilize around that.
Great. I think we'll maybe wrap it up, and we invite you all to come to the reception and to talk more with the speakers. But first, we'd like to give them a huge round of applause.
Oh, we're